Hello, everyone. This is Avantika from the Asian and Pacific Islander Domestic Violence Resource Project, or DVRP, and I'm so excited to welcome you and give you context for the conversation you'll be listening to today. Last year, in December, our community engagement and volunteer support intern, Sunny, sat down with Lakan to discuss Qi Gong and Beyond. Lakan is a hilot binabaylan acupuncturist and Chinese medicine practitioner, and his practice is informed by his identity as a queer, trans, non-binary Tagalog person living in the U.S. His goals is to help individuals and communities live their fullest lives by offering a decolonizing approach to medicine rooted in traditional and ancestral practices. Lakan is hosting a 4-part Qi Gong workshop series for DVRP starting Tuesday, January 30th. This workshop is going to take place on 4 consecutive Tuesdays from January 30th and is going to be virtual from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Please register for the workshop through the link in the description. In this conversation, you're going to hear about Lakan's journey into Chinese medicine, complexities of practicing in the U.S., and their commitment to trauma-informed approaches. Lakan shared their insights into their Qigong practice, emphasizing pleasure and healing. The discussion also touched on the differences between Western and Asian traditional medicine. As Lakan prepares for a Qigong workshop with DVRP, they express anticipation for guiding participation through a transformative experience, inviting everyone to show up as they are for a journey of self-discovery and well-being. A full transcript of the conversation can be found on our website at www.dvrp.org under the blog tab. So now, without further ado, the conversation with Lakan.
So as I said, welcome to this interview with DVRP. We just wanted to highlight some of the incredible work that you've been doing, and also just ask you a few more questions. And so I guess to first start off is, what inspired you to pursue a career in Asian traditional medicine?
Well, my first introduction to Chinese medicine was at a community clinic, and I was having a lot of burnouts working in the nonprofit sector. Um, and I also didn't have a lot of access to medical care. I didn't have insurance at the time, and doing Chinese medicine in this kind of community setting was something that I could access financially, and it really helped to reset my nervous system. So it was treating multiple systems that I was experiencing symptoms in. Um, and that was kind of my first introduction to it, was through being a patient. And eventually that led to, further interest in actually being a practitioner. And I shifted my career from doing more nonprofit management to doing medicine as a different way to engage my community, and to, like, really support, I guess, healing around the communities that I was part of.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess also I saw on your personal website that you try to have a lot of trauma informed and decolonial approaches in your practice. And I was curious if you could expand a little bit about that and what it looks like.
That's a huge topic. So on like a very large, more systemic level, a lot of Asian medicines are practiced in the US in a way that's very appropriative, where they are taken from those communities, like we'll say acupuncture, for example, acupuncture and Chinese herbs. Um, it's taken from the original cultures, and then in some places like the US, it's a very white dominated profession. And the people who tend to access those services, who have the money to do so, are often white affluent people. And so it is something that is like taken out of the original context, and then there's barriers in place for people to use that because of appropriation, because of the idea of like more European white centric people going and taking something that isn't theirs and doing nothing in reciprocity to uplift the community that it comes from. And I think it's complicated because it is an open system. You don't have to be Chinese to practice it, but that doesn't mean there's no need for reciprocity. Um, there is definitely a need for reciprocity. There's definitely a need to respect where it came from and then understand how it's been like used in a colonial mindset to just kind of take this resource and guard it and hoard it. There's also a lot of complicated history about how Chinese medicine was practiced or has been practiced in the US, where, it was practiced for a really long time in Chinese immigrant communities, and it was unregulated because that's like something that was just practiced within community. Um, and then as like white folks started, I think it was in the 60s or 70s, as white folks started noticing this medicine and it started to get more popular, then regulations were introduced on the state and national level around this medicine that essentially was trying to make it so that the Chinese folks who were already practicing this, because they weren't licensed, then what they were doing was illegal, if that makes sense. So like white folks come in, they're like, oh, this is so fancy. We're going to make regulations so that only we're the ones who are certified. And the people who have actually been practicing this for many, many years and who, like aren't licensed to our standards are now doing something criminal. And so you can, if you want to do more research on that, you can research Miriam Lee and her case. She was a acupuncture practitioner in California who was basically brought to trial for doing all of these illegal acupuncture treatments. Even though she's a Chinese person, has been practicing this for a while and was like very held. It is ultimately a very beautiful story because all of the people that she had treated, that she had helped in the community stood up for her and was like, nope, you can't do this. She's been helping us. She's been like giving us medicine and healing this entire time, and you can't, like criminalize her for that. So it's very complicated. There's a lot of history there that people just don't necessarily know. And then with hilot is traditional medicine from the Philippines, and this is a gory story, but basically when the Spanish colonizers came to the Philippines, they basically, as part of their colonization, decided to destroy people in the communities there, in the indigenous communities there, who held knowledge of medicine, of culture, who had very significant, prominent roles in their communities. They decided to eradicate them, right? Like these are the Babaylan, the Catalonan, the Mubaki. Each tribe has like a different name for those folks who are holding medicine, but it's not just medicine, it's a lot of other things. So the colonizers targeted them and tried to murder all of them, basically, to get rid of this medical system, get rid of this social cultural support. And so it's really like now it's really beautiful that there's a movement to bring a lot of this medicine back that like was almost completely lost through like multiple waves of invasion in the Philippines. So yeah, like I could go on and on and on about that topic. There's so much to talk about there, but that's just kind of on the broader systemic sense, like what some of the history is.
Yeah, that's like a really good fact and like history to know and like to acknowledge, especially that like it's not just like US based, but also it's like transnational, it's like also diasporic based. So yeah, so thank you also for like giving me a little bit of that history because a lot of that I did not even know about. Yeah, and then I guess like into like your like Qi Gong practice, I didn't notice that like you center it to be around for the queer, trans, and BIPOC communities. And I was just curious on like how you're able to structure that for these various communities.
Yeah, I think a lot of that structure is just sort of built into how I teach because that's, those are my identities and my communities. And so that lived experience really informs my practice. Um, and a lot of us, because of racism, white supremacy, homophobia, transphobia, on a very like not basic, but like on a very like collective level, a lot of us are excluded from different kinds of healing practices because it's not safe, right? Um, yeah, I don't know how to say it more plainly than that, where like so much of us have medical trauma where we've been to doctors who don't believe our experiences, who don't take what we are bringing to them very seriously, who misgender us, um, who don't take into account that there's often generational trauma that we're dealing with. Um, and so what I try to do in my classes is try to make space for that. Like there is no way that I can create 100% safe space. That's just not possible. But I do try to, you know, like we'll talk about pronouns, we'll talk about how we need to cultivate awareness of our bodies, um, as a way to just, you know, a- as a way to survive, but also to thrive. Like a lot of us are in situations, or we have been in situations where it's not safe to be in our bodies, for whatever reason. And Qigong is a way to start exploring that and to come home to ourselves, to move in a gentle way. I like to encourage folks to move within the range of motion that feels good rather than let's move to the point where we feel pain. So you might have heard like, oh, stop if it hurts. Like if you're doing an exercise or any kind of movement class, I go a little bit even less than that because a lot of times by the time it hurts for some of us, that means we've already injured ourselves. If you're someone who struggles with, um, oh, what's the word? Disassociation. If someone struggles with disassociation, they often don't feel their bodies very easily. And so by the time they do feel pain, it's already the injuries have already happened. They just didn't feel the lead up to to the actual like when the pain is manifesting. So I try to teach people to at least to like start looking for pleasure in how they move and how they are present in their body and let that be the guide rather than pain. Does that make sense? And that way, like, especially if we're working with, um, like maybe we're in bodies that have like a really ramped up nervous system. Everything's really tight, everything's really tense. If you're introducing things that feel really uncomfortable or cause more pain, then the body will tense even more. The nervous system will get even more activated because it's already looking for threats. So this is a very somatic way of um, kind of re-regulating things a little bit to have a more controlled way of exploring motion, of exploring presence in the body, of exploring sensation, where the person practicing it has a lot more control, where maybe they don't have control in other parts of their life, but in that moment, in that hour where maybe we're working together, they can be like, okay, we are a little bit safer here. We can be a little bit less tense. We don't have to be on guard the whole time. Um, and like at least in that moment, there's a little bit of a break for the nervous system, which is super, super important. Because a lot of us, we have to have it a little more active to survive. That's very real. Um, but it creates an opportunity for discernment where we can say, like, in this moment, we can be a little bit more chill and it's going to be okay. And it's kind of like saving up when you have to be in fight or flight for when you actually have to be in fight or flight, right? Like that fight or flight response is so necessary, and it's not sustainable to be in it all the time. It costs a lot of resources from our body, from our emotions, from our mental health.
Yeah, thank you so much for that like clarification on what that looks like. And like it's like so like impressive how like you're able to integrate a lot of like disability justice oriented things like this more turn towards focusing on like the body feeling good when like the Western like medicine industry is like often like very inaccessible and very like professionalized. So I was also just like curious if you could also like illuminate us more about the differences that you've seen between Western medicine and Asian traditional medicine, and also like your general thoughts about the medical industrial complex within the US.
Mm. I think that the idea of Western medicine is so funny because, like pre-industrialization, like a lot of Western medicine was more holistic. So, like every culture has had some kind of plant medicine, has had, like a more integrated approach to health where you're looking at the physical body and the emotional and the spiritual, um, all of these things. And I think it's really like Western medicine, which I'm gonna call it allistic or allopathic medicine. That is relatively new, right? Like the invention of the pharmaceutical company is relatively new. How we have medical systems now is very new. I don't think it's all bad. I think some of it is very necessary, but like it is how I view the body and how I view healing is very relational, right? Like it is it is more about looking at the body and the context that the body is in, the external context the body is in as an ecosystem. So it's like an ecosystem within an ecosystem. And in that ecosystem, there is health when things are more balanced, when everything is in its role, it's in its place, everything is relational and working in that way. And I wouldn't necessarily like if someone was ill, I wouldn't be like, oh, we need to fight that illness. We need to eradicate whatever that is. I would say, like, okay, is this part of the body that needs to be strengthened a little bit? Like, instead of spraying everything with pesticides, maybe I'm planting, you know, flowers that attract natural predators of the pests that are eating the rest of the garden. Does that make sense? Right? Like we're balancing it in a different way so that everything is healthy. Healthy is not a great word, but everything is a little more harmonious. Whereas I think in more allopathic medicine, it's more like warfare, right? Like we cut it off, we burn it off, we, eradicate it, we fight it. So that's more like let's spray pesticides on it till like all of the things are dead, but then that messes up the rest of the garden. So are there times when that is maybe useful? Yeah. Like I'm not gonna say like I can cure cancer like with acupuncture. I'm sure there are doctors out there who actually have that ability. Um, but it is not my first approach. And I think that allopathic medicine has something to learn from medicines that have been around for thousands of years.
Yeah, thank you for that. For the, like yeah, because like I know like a lot about like the cure concept, and I really liked your like analogy about like the garden and like the difference between like pesticides versus like planting like a flower or a certain plant that is like more can like ameliorate the process rather than trying to completely
Hmm.
remove it, because sometimes it's not possible for like disabled individuals or like with whatever like disorder or like background that they have. So yeah, so like I really liked your like explanation about that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
we don't have to always look at the body or the disease or the issue as like a problem necessarily. I mean, people can have whatever relationship they want to it. But I don't necessarily view that way. Like,
Mhm.
oh no, the I don't want us to be enemies of our bodies.
Yeah, I really like that concept. And then also like I also saw on your website that like you talk a lot about like healing work. So I was interested in how you're able to implement that not only in like your professional life, but also through your personal life.
Oh, wait, can you be more specific? Because
Yeah, like
healing work is a huge
um
topic.
hmm, like as a practitioner, how you're able to like help your like clients and like the folks who see you to like implement the healing work, but then also like on the flip side, how you're able to also continue this healing work for yourself.
Hmm. Um, I would say like something that has been guiding me a lot, like the last couple years, is letting pleasure lead me and using that as like a guiding tool. Like, does something feel good in my whole body? Like when I make a decision about something, is that feeling good everywhere? Does that feel aligned? Am I moving in a way that brings more joy to myself and subsequently everyone around me, or am I moving away from that? So I'm someone who like I'm autistic and I have ADHD, and that has been super helpful for me for regulating myself. Um, because if I am moving against my nature, against like the way that my brain works, against my neurotype, it doesn't feel good, right? Like I cannot force myself to work in a way that an allistic or neurotypical person works. And I have to kind of use that internal sense of like joy and pleasure to help me make decisions. And that, you know, that like spreads outwards from me. So if I'm like working in a way that like I'm burning myself out all the time, um, I get that leads to me like getting like a lot of fatigue, a lot of like mental brain fog. I have like a lower threshold of stress, like all of this stuff. That means that my work with other people suffers from that. I'm not saying like that never happens to me, but the more I can work uh, in alignment with myself, the less that happens, the easier it is to do what I love. And what I love is doing medicine. So it's it's like if I can balance my own ecosystem, the more I can do that, the more the ecosystem that I am part of, that's like outside of me, the more I can engage in that in a more harmonious way, right? Like I can't give to anyone if my cup is not full. So I try to, as much as I can, move from a place of abundance. Um, and that being said, there are times when I can't because circumstances, but the more I move from a place of abundance, the easier it is to recover from those times where I don't have much of a choice.
Yeah, that's such a great like mindset and outlook to have like throughout your life because I feel like pleasure is not something most people prioritize or like I don't know, I feel like it's like sometimes like looked down upon in like our like capitalist society or like it's like something kind of like we don't think about in the forefront of our brain. So that's actually like such
Yeah.
a way to guide your life. Yeah.
It's like if you don't have that, um, then it's like it's easy to become to believe the illusion that your oppression is normal, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like if you are not in touch with your own pleasure, your own joy, then the illusion that is happening around you that, that it's like fine to be oppressed, that it's like, we don't deserve relationships that are mutually loving and reciprocal.
Mm.
if you are not in touch with that, it's hard to discern,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I guess the last question I had for today was a bit more about the Qigong workshop you're doing with DVRP. And I was
Hmm.
just curious of like what folks can expect for this workshop.
Yeah. So if you've never done Qigong before, it is a movement practice that originates in China. Qigong, like you can roughly translate it to like cultivation of Qi, or Qi being vital energy. It's very low impact slash no impact. It's like if you've ever seen like sweet Asian elders in the park kind of moving really slowly and gracefully, we're gonna do something like that. Like they're just like um, very gentle movement exercises. It's very easy to modify what we're doing if people have different like physical needs. Um, the forms come from martial arts, but the difference is we are not training the body for combat. We're training the body for wellness. We're training the body to be more in touch with itself and for our chi, our vital energy, to circulate better. And that, you know, spreads out to um, different benefits depending on like who's doing it and what's going on with them. So folks might experience some calm, some tranquility, physical or mental. Sometimes people feel kind of warm and tingly afterwards because their circulation has improved and it's moving a little bit better. It can be very helpful for pain relief. That's another thing that can happen with Qigong. Different, better energy. Like sometimes people are like, oh, like my energy level has like increased and I feel like I can do more things. Um, and on the very basic level, you'll be inhabiting your body more. You'll be home for a little bit, at least.
Yeah, that sounds like really exciting. And also just like a follow-up on that is like what is like the thing that you look forward to most like for this Qigong workshop with DVRP?
I always love teaching Qigong because it's really fun for me. Because I also get to move and I also get these benefits. Um, but it's every time I've taught a class, people are kind of surprised at what they experience about what their bodies can do when they're like, oh, I'm doing this very simple movement, a few times, and all of a sudden I notice that I feel my feet again, or that tension I had in my neck was gone. And so it's really like I get to accompany people on a little self-discovery about what is possible with their bodies and the sensations that they feel and where they're at. And that to me is always like a little bit of a miracle, right? Like it's very magical because here's one circumstance that you enter the session with, and then at the end, something has changed. Your reality, you were in this session and your reality altered a little bit and you're coming out a little bit different. And sometimes that's you notice something small, wonderful. Sometimes you notice something big, also awesome. But no one experiences nothing.
Yeah, that like sounds like so much fun. And I guess like I was wondering if like you had any like final questions or comments that you wanted to give.
Hmm. I think that it's just show up as you are. It is not a practice where I demand perfection. To me, it's a very low demand thing. The only thing is that you show up. You show
Mhm.
up as you are, and we can work with where you're starting from.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, good thing, good heads up for people for folks who are gonna go to the workshop.